Energy. It is all around us, both seen and unseen. It affects all the lives within humanity, our great planet Earth, and the entire universe. It is a conscious cosmic matrix, an ever-evolving cycle, creating, breaking down, and recreating. This is Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Andrea tells us that energy is the foundation of our human experience, intrinsically affecting every facet of our lives, our perceptions, choices, and actions, as well as the challenges, opportunities, and people we attract. So now, please welcome the host of Connected, Andrea Dragonfly.
Hey, good people. Welcome. I'm your host, Andrea Dragonfly, and this is the show Connected. And here is where we talk about all sorts of different spiritual and conscious ideas and connect them into our lives, into each other. And the invitation is to further make these connections as you go through your life. So we had a very interesting show last week. And I just want to say for those who watched it, thanks for bearing with me through it. Um, we're talking about dense, dark, and evil forces here. And when we're working with these energies, they are very intelligent energies and they can actually operate and affect things. And so there are no coincidences. It's all connected that I had some definitely like technology glitches last week. And I had a few websites that I had up on my screen that I was going to pull from because I didn't want to write all that information out on notes and stuff. And all of that got shut down. So I rearranged my day to day and made sure that the information that I wanted to bring forward was not connected to technology other than my notes. And so I think we're good to go. So I just want to acknowledge that. And then I also want to say that I am not an expert in what would be called demonology or the classifications of demons. I do have my own understanding. I have my wisdom, my knowledge that I have grown my wisdom bank and knowledge repertoire over a few decades. And so with that, I can speak to what I know. And that's what I'm bringing to you through these shows. And so with that, I'm not going to go through all that there is around demons in a very kind of detailed manner. That is not what I'm doing this evening or last week even. But I want to talk about how we need to be aware of them. We need to be aware of their energy and how they actually operate. And so that really is what this is about. And so it's kind of also understanding that these dark forces, these demonic forces, actually have a very spiritual role in our lives, in the evolution of humanity. And so just like a little recap from last week, I talked about a whole different way of how humans came into existence. And I went onto my website, and if you go into resources, it's on the media page, and you go to episode 33, and I listed this whole piece in this very long book by Rudolf Steiner. And Rudolf Steiner, without having to spend a lot of time, but he's an amazing adept. And an adept is somebody who is deeply connected into the spiritual realm. He's also one of the mystery traditions. He is the founder of anthroposophy. He has spent a long time connected into theosophy. And so these are some of the wisdom traditions that have really kind of moved throughout history, throughout humanity, but are also not very present in the mainstream media. They're not what's called exoteric information. This is a little bit more esoteric, and esoteric means we need to go within. We need to find the connection into these spiritual beings even, where we can really get the information. Now, this leads into so many connection points. And I'm bringing this to you without a lot of foundation, without a lot of background. So it may be very confusing, and that absolutely will be so. Because within this, Rudolf Steiner in his own has written innumerable books and lecture series, thousands, 2,000 plus. And he has a free website, which is called the rsarchives.org. There are all sorts of groups around the world. He's actually a person that was born in Austria. He spent a lot of time working within that whole area of Germany, spent a lot of time lecturing in Germany. And it was really about the father of what's called spiritual science. And it's about how we can actually really connect into the consciousness of the cosmos to get truth, right? So it's not going to be the exoteric where so exoteric is external, it's already outside. And this is where we have our Bibles, we have our Torah, we have the different secret scripts that are out there that different religions certainly work from. And we have access. You can go to the library and get that information quite easily. Or it's like, in the church and, in the pews and things like that. So that's a very different version. So this is where you really go in, and he's one of many. We could call him a sage, we could call him a prophet, we could call him many things, where he's bringing this information, and he actually teaches the methods. Now, he was a turn of the century spiritual scholar, is what I'm going to call him, right through into the 20th century. So he was born in the 1800s, and he died shortly before, right around World War I. I don't remember his dates. However, his work is phenomenal, and he also is very much in line with a lot of the other esoteric texts, of information that's been buried and hidden because of the Abrahamic traditions, and Christianity in particular had tried to destroy much of it over the last 2,000 years. Or 1,700 years, if you want to look at everything around since 330, AD. And so a lot of the information was sought out to be kind of destroyed because a new version of reality was trying to be put into place. So anyway, I know that's a lot. So on my website, there is this part within the occult science, and I don't want anybody to be afraid of the word occult, because occult is an umbrella of the Western mysteries, and there's many things that are in there that have a lot of truth. But we have to experience that for ourselves. We have to come to the truth on our own, which is really what this whole show is about, bringing these concepts, bringing this information forward to try it on, to let it inform you, and then for you to also go and find more information, because everything here, even just talking about the dark side and, malevolent beings and evil and whatnot. I mean, we could have a 3-year program that and you still would have so much more to learn about it. So we really just scratched the surface here. In occult science, Rudolf Steiner talks about this whole other level of human creation, starting with how we have first formed our consciousness before we form our physical bodies, which is very different than the hard sciences. And I was a human evolution major in college, so I studied all of those sciences of biological anthropology and all that stuff. And it's not based in the archaeological record. This is completely different. The archaeological record says we developed these bodies first, and then the consciousness came. However, that is absolutely the opposite in the way that the Western mysteries and the great schools of the past have always connected to it. There's something far more going on there. And it's only within, the newer last, century plus, or even just during the last couple of centuries, where everything needed to be proved in order for it to be real and true, that everything kind of shifted. So I just want to say that on the website again, there is this piece. It's one of the chapters within Steiner's book called It's called Occult Science, but it's really about, I didn't write the chapter down, however, creation of man on earth. And if you scroll halfway down, and there's a lot there, we're going to get into how the moon phase, and I talked about first, there was this part of us that, through the elements, and we had to build all these different swirls of consciousness before we can actually even get to the intellectual consciousness and the emotional consciousness. And that happens in the moon phase. So we think about, the moon, and how the moon can affect how we feel, and how we feel can affect how we think, and they have a relationship with one another. And so also during that time when we're developing the intellectual and emotional intelligence, there were these beings that didn't fully get to develop all of that, and they kind of fell away. Now I'm speaking on very simplistic terms. If you read Steiner's work, he reads like a 20th century scholar. So his work can be very challenging to really absorb. And that's why there's all sorts of groups all over the world that work with his philosophy and support each other and really trying to understand how he's bringing the information forward, because it's not the way that we are familiar with, right? So anyway, that is there. And so if you have any questions about that, I will be talking a lot more about Steiner as we move forward in the different series of shows that will be coming up. But I needed to just kind of bring that in. And so within that, when those beings never fully formed, they only developed certain of the lower vibrations, which kind of causes disruption and some chaos, and they're not able to have their own human form, but they can become these attachments. And we're going to continue to talk about these attachments, and as we go through this lecture series, I'm going to call it, because through the next few weeks, I think that the content will expand. And especially we're around the holiday of Halloween. And this is how it first all came out, right? All of this was coming forward because, hey, this is the time where the veil between the worlds are its thinnest, and we're more likely to connect into ghosts. And all of the horror movies are on Netflix and Prime and whatever your TV streaming channels are. And people really get into the season of dense energy. So understanding why dense energy has come into our lives, I think, is what's missing in the greater understanding of what it all is, right? And so that understanding, again, from what I had said last week, is that they are all spiritual forces too. They're all here to help us evolve in our humanity. And so if we look at this earth experience, because our consciousness really descended into these human forms on earth, and it took us a long time, millions of years, for these bodies to be perfected in the way that they are. And even our organs were actually working through millions of years to be able to work the way they do within our bodies. And so if we think about that on an energetic level, everything is highly, divinely intelligenced, if I can use that word. So, and I might make up words, and I do have a crazy lexicon or vocabulary. So if I say things that don't make sense, you are welcome to put them in the comment section, ask questions, ask for clarity. And I also have the live call-in number at the top of the screen. And if you want to call in, you can call in too. I haven't had a single person call in yet, and I'm okay with that. But you are welcome too. I'd love to hear somebody's voice along the way, right? And so this is that time for us to kind of ask some questions and get clarity. Because I know my language is deeply steeped in all this information. It's been that way for decades, and I forget sometimes how to speak normal human English. So with that, we're going to take a quick break. And as we come back from that break, we're going to definitely dive in and carry this conversation forward into a deeper understanding of why these beings exist. All right, I'll see you back here in 2.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them. Rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies. Find settings that allow them to be the most productive and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. All right, so let's dive in. And I just going to start this off by saying again that this is not an area that I have expertise in, but it is an area that I have a repertoire of knowledge and wisdom in. So with that, demons have been playing out and have been written and depicted throughout time immemorable. I think that some of the earliest depictions of the demonic realms come from even like ancient Mesopotamia. Actually, even earlier than ancient Mesopotamia, there's something called Zoroastrianism. And that is a belief that comes out of Iran, which was known as the Fertile Crescent back in those days. And Mesopotamia is right in there as well. But Zoroastrianism is really actually one of the very first belief systems that ever came out in within the archaeological record. And now we have to remember that there's a lot of different beliefs. And as humanity has kind of spread out from consciousness into these different pockets of geographic pockets, this was one that has been well documented over time. And so this is actually based about 2000, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say 2000, well, 2000, because it's 2 millennia before the Common Era. So if the Common Era is right at the time when Jesus's birth, then this is right at the time, 2000 years prior. So 2 millennium before the Common Era, where there's depictions of demons and dark forces. And then I think it was first kind of like pictured in about 600 BCE. So right around that time, where you start to get some of that as well. Now, ancient Mesopotamia is in the middle of all of that. So we can start to see depictions of what would be considered to be dark, dense entity forces, demonic forces. But even so, if we go through, like even there are demons in the Vedic scriptures of Hinduism. And the Vedic scriptures are very old as well. So we're really looking that they've been around and depicted throughout Buddhism, which also affirms their existence of hell, different types of hells. We have the Abrahamic traditions. And again, the Abrahamic traditions are, we're going to start off with Judaism. And then through Judaism, we have Christianity and Islam. Now, Judaism doesn't really have a lot about demons. There is something within the Old Testament that does talk about Lucifer. And so there's a whole part in there that connects to the Lucifer and the fallen angel. However, it doesn't really have a hierarchy or any kind of classification system like a lot of these other belief systems do. And then, of course, we have the Christianity hierarchies. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. We have the Islamic hierarchies as well. And so there are many different types of classifications. And so it really depends also on what time of humanity are you looking at, right? Because they're going to shift and change according to the cultural relationship, where we are in that relationship. So one of the very earliest classification systems actually is from the 11th century, and it's a classification system which is called Celsius's taxonomy, and they connect the demons with the earthly elements. And so again, we're getting into classifications. I just spoke about how demons have been connected to and referenced, but this is where we first start finding classifications of this type of information, right? So 11th century. So within that, this old classification system, we're looking at, there are, I think there's 7. So we have what's the igneous, which is fire. So we think about igneous rock as the lava, molten lava coming up from the fire. So there's the fire demons. Then there's the aerial, air demons. Then we have what's called the marine or water demons, the terrestrial or earth demons, the subterranean. So these are the ones that live underground. So they're living within, the layers of the earth. And then we have something called the heliophobic or the nocturnal demons, and these are the ones that are terrified of the light. So this is like our very first classification system. Now, all sorts of different types of classification systems come after that. I spoke during the angelic hierarchy, the angel allies. I talked about the angelic hierarchy and about how we had these 3 different tiers of angelic power, really big power, and they actually helped create humans in the process because of their participation in what they bring in weaving in the consciousness of the cosmos within our consciousness, right? So it's really through our relationship to the higher angels that we have the consciousness that we do have. And so in the hierarchy, the highest order of the angelic hierarchy, we have the seraphim, the cherubim. I'm going to just take a little slower. The seraphim, which is what is known as the spirits of love. Now, the counterpart, and so there is this belief that there are also fallen angels that come from these different hierarchies. So the fallen angels that would come from the more of the demonic, they're actually the corresponding diabolical spirits to these ones, right? So they would be known as the false gods, what you would be praying to as a false god, right? And then within the hierarchy, the highest order, we have, after the seraphim, we have the cherubim, and that's the spirits of harmony. And then the corresponding diabolical spirit is the spirit of lies. So if we think about harmony and how everything kind of, comes together and flow and beauty, but when you get lies, everything starts to not flow in harmony. So we're really looking at opposition here, okay? And then the third one in the highest order is called the thrones. And then they're the spirits of will and our will force and our ability to put things into action. And so they are also on the corresponding diabolical spirits are the vessel of lies. So, so whereas the cherubim is the spirit of harmony, and that counterpart is spirit of lies, now we have vessel of lies. So this is really where all of that energy begins to weave together. Now they work on a higher level. They are the highest tier, so they work in the cosmos. They're the higher cosmic forces. And then so then now we're moving into the second tier or the middle order, and those would be known as the dominions. Now there's different names according to different traditions. I also have this on my website under resources. And all this information is, when it comes to the angels, it's under the angel allies. I don't have this on there yet, but I can put it under for tonight's show. So within the dominions, also known as the spirits of wisdom, we have the diabolical spirits, which are known as the revengers of evil. So this is about revenge, not wisdom. Wisdom is applied knowledge and growth through action, and revenge is you did me wrong. So they experience something and now they want revenge, not the beauty of the growth and the wisdom that comes with that, right? So again, opposition. Now, in the middle of that order, we have what would be called the mites or the virtues, which is also known as spirits of motion. And then within the counterpart, the opposition, diabolical spirit, is the deluders. So spirits of motion, opposite, diluting, really inhibiting that motion, diluting it in a way that's not going to be of the higher energetic. And then the last one within that middle order is known as the powers, and they're the spirits of form. So the diabolical opposition is the aerial powers. So spirits of form is where form comes together, where we're creating. And that's what we had to create. We had to create our consciousness before we could create our form. So all of that was happening before we could land in these bodies. That's how that consciousness comes in, right? So the aerial powers are out there because within that form flowing and kind of wafting around, they're kind of distorting that. They're trying to inhibit the form from coming together. Now we get into the lower hierarchy of angels. And so here we have what's called the highest angelic order within the lowest. It's called the principalities or the spirits of personality. And so this is also the diabolical opposition is known as the Furies. And so they're the ones that are going to come in. And, this is also like we all have these different personalities, and there's people who don't like each other because of their personality, right? And you think, oh, furious. We were just making these connections because everything's connected, right? So we're looking at how the opposition works. And then in the middle of that last lower order of angels, we have what we know as the archangels or the archangeloi. And they're also considered the sons of fire. And that has a whole story to it that I'm not going to go into. But on the diabolical order, they're known as the accusers. So this is, fire has a lot to do with action. And so the accusers on the diabolical level is taking that action and making it wrong, judging, bad, all of that goes along with action. And then the last order within that lowest order, the last are the angels or the angeloi. And they're also known as sons of twilight. And then on the diabolical opposition, they're known as the tempters and the ensnarers. So we can start to see how there's layers, there's levels. And through each of these levels, now I went from the highest down to the lowest. But as human beings, we're going to experience them like, oh, temptation. I'm going to be ensnared in somebody's trapped. The accuser. I'm going to be accused of something that somebody doesn't like about me, whatever, right? My who I am and my authentic, my authenticity, is going to create fear, somebody to not like me and my true authentic self, which is that fury and furiousness. So, and it goes up through these different hierarchies. Now, and there's many different classifications like that. There's so many through different cultures, different times. So when you start to do a little bit of research and you look into it, you begin to see what was really going on in the culture at that time, what was important, what was happening, even based on how the demonic hierarchy is being classified. Now, throughout other different classification systems, and I don't have all of this written out as to what century this is, but we have what would be called the nobility hierarchy. And so this is where we're looking at kings. And this is what I was trying to speak of last week, and everything had gotten offline at that point. And I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what my nobility is. So of course I wrote it all out. But again, we have our kings, we have our princes, we have the dukes, marquises, earls, knights, and presidents. So when we look at, again, how these dark, dense forces begin to classify them based on what they're bringing to each human being. And it's not only just to human beings, because I'm going to talk, shortly here about how they can actually bring this to not just one person, but to groups of people, shifting and changing how we perceive, how we think, how we judge, right? And this is where we're going in this conversation, is how this impacts us, and how it just not only impacts us wherever you are in the world, it's impacting a lot of us specifically who live in the United States, because our presidential election is fully in our face. And I think it's so appropriate for this information to come out right now, because there's a lot. I can't watch anything or receive any news without being deeply connected to all these dense, dark forces that are behind the scenes operating. So we're going to, finish out the rest of the conversation with that conversation. But as we still go through this classification styles, then what we also have is we have what's called the government of hell. And so the government of hell, you have the rulers, and the rulers are going to be known as the emperor. And I believe that oftentimes Lucifer is depicted as the emperor. And we're going to, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about Lucifers right now. That's not where I'm going. But then we're just looking at how they all exist. And then we have what's known as the princes, and then the grand dukes. And then also, so those are the rulers, and they're going to be ruling in tiers, like the hierarchy, right? So there's the highest hierarchy, the emperor. Mid hierarchy is the prince. The grand duke is the lower hierarchy. And then within that, they have spirits, dense, malevolent spirits, who manage the day-to-day affairs. So again, we're looking at government, the government of hell. So these are also considered throughout different classification systems to be things like prime ministers, commander-in-chief, general, lieutenant general, a brigadier, the camp marshal. So we start to look to see, okay, when might culture start to bring in this type of government, right? And so how all these government people play a part. And again, I'm going to reiterate what I think is really important. Dark, dense energy in its most spiritual process, why it comes into our lives, is because it's giving us the opportunity to choose our freedom, to fight for our freedom, to stand up for our freedom, our free will, our choice, because they want to take it away. That's what they do. They take it away. They want to take away our power. We think about all the abusers in the world, and I've gone through this in previous shows, and we look at all the different kinds of abuse and how our power is being taken away. But these are dark, dense forces, and it doesn't mean that everybody's got an attachment or everybody's got a demon inside of them, because that's not true. But this is part of that opportunity for our greater growth. If we recognize and we can switch in our consciousness and say, oh, yeah, humanity really sucks in many ways because it's so overrun with people wanting power, right? Even if it's about abusing someone physically, violently, sexually, financially, mentally, emotionally, right? So if we take away other people's power, then that person has a little bit more power. And this is where we begin to understand how this power differentiation begins to play out. And this is why healing, this is why choosing for ourselves. No, you can't do that to me anymore. And of course, it takes us a little time to figure out how we truly get that back. And that is the process. And when we figure it out for ourselves, we begin to recognize that, hey, we don't want that for other people either. You've heard me talk about the me and the we. And that's another part of our earthly human experience, our evolution, is that when we recognize how it is for us, we begin to become more aware, conscious, connected to the fact that, oh shit, that really sucked for me. And that's going to suck for those people too. And so again, we have these multiple lifetimes. We've all been at the effect of different types of things. And we're working through these imprints to allow ourselves to be free of them. And this is the process, right? So, so looking at that. And then, we have what we call the 7 deadly sins or the 7 deadly devils. Now, within this place, we all have heard about this. This is definitely something that we have connected to. There's even a movie out there called Seven. I remember watching that 30 years ago or something like that. And but the 7 deadly sins actually comes from right around 1400, which is the 1409 to 1410, which is comes from a proto-Protestant Christianity at the time. And I know that none of this makes sense, but you can look this up online. So that just means that Protestant was coming out, and it was like, it's a Protestant Christianity, which is not the Catholic Christianity, right? So it's protesting the Catholic version of that. And so this is where they call it, and I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly because I think it's probably a Latin word, but it's like the lantern of light. It's lanterne of light or something. And so they came up with the 7 deadly sins of pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, and lust. And about how there are demons connected to each of those, and they're different demons that are coming in that invoke that in a person, right? And bring them into that sin. They're seen as these sins, the 7 sins. Now, a century and a half later, in the 1589, 16th century, is now the Binsfeld's classification. And what Binsfeld did is he still used the same 7 sins, but he attached different demons according to what was popular or known at that time. And of course, several of them were the same, but some of them were different. And so this just goes to show how, every 100 years or whatever, 150 years, things are going to change. Things are going to change. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take we're going to take another break. And when we're going to come back in 2 minutes, we're going to go ahead and really dive into looking at the greater importance of this information for us in the now. Okay? So I'll see you back here in 2.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. Yeah, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com. or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Great, welcome back. Okay, so that's the classifications over time. Now, kind of more in a modern day, one of the things that has shown up in my life, as I had mentioned before, is that I've been working with many people who have had different types of attachments, different types of demonic possessions. And because we're such a mixing pot of humanity, I don't really know who I'm working with until I kind of get the opportunity to go in and see, well, where is this coming from? Because different forces are going to come from different places. Some dark energies are going to be connected to different belief systems, right? And so, with how I mentioned in all these different other wisdom traditions and religions and whatnot, there are going to be different types of beings. So, and even with the African tribal religions and whatnot, they're going to have their version of that as well. And so it's really through my relationship with the benevolent, the good, the allies, that I'm able to understand what it is that I'm working with, and whether or not I actually have the toolkit or the resources to be able to really work with that. Now, again, when working with these types of energies, we're really working with a huge team. Huge. Like, I could never do that alone. I would never, ever, ever try to do that alone. Oh my God, no, that's terrible. And so, but it's really through my relationship, and I am incredibly grateful and blessed. I was put on this path. It came to me, not that I ever chose it, but within these types of relationships, this is how we begin to understand how these work. Now, again, we're talking about demonic forces. Now, here, I'm only really able to work with what would be considered, so I'm going to move into a new classification in which we're going to see it a little different. We're going to see it for the modern day. So I'm going to kind of just speak to it quickly, and then I'm going to flesh it out just so you understand what I'm fleshing out. So we have what's called, since I've been going from the top of the hierarchy down, I'm going to hit 3 different hierarchies again. So in the modern world, we're going to call there's those which are known as the greater demons. And the greater demons are the really big badass ones. But they're expansive. And they work in a very expansive way. And they infiltrate institutions. And I think it's really important. And I'm going to kind of end on this, so I'm going to kind of go through it, and then we're going to come back up, because we're really at the effect of some major institutions, being at the effect of these dark, dense energies. So they affect institutions. And then we have what's known as the mid-sized demons. And the mid-sized demons infiltrate large groups. And I'm going to flesh that out as well. So I'm just going from top to the bottom, because that's just, keeping it in the flow the way this show's been run. And then we have what's called the lesser demons. And the lesser demons come in and they affect one-on-one. So this is where we have our possessions. This is where we have our stories on, movies and all that kind of stuff. And it's a real thing. However, Hollywood does glamorize a lot of this. And so, however, of course, there's the true stories that are out there as well, right? But it is one of those things, and I'm not going to go into any detail on how to do all the work, but the thing is that within that, on a one-on-one, this demon is looking to come in and kind of more or less take over the being of that person. And one of the things is that they don't have their own body. They can't have their own bodies, so they like to jump into other people's bodies, and then they can suck the life force out of that. Ultimately, the goal is to suck their life force out of it, making them stronger, and then they will potentially kill that person and jump into somebody else. And that does exist. And I don't mean to scare anybody, but we just want to know, hey, you know what? That's real. That happens. And I joke about it because, we have to joke about all the craziness of, the cosmos. So in that, we just want to recognize that those absolutely can be worked with. And it's really essential for us to build these relationships. And that's what humanity is missing so much about spiritual connection, about conscious connection, about who's on our team. Who are these benevolent beings? How do I protect myself? And again, the next month and a half, probably, we're going to be talking a lot about, the difference, within all these great benevolent allies, the good ones, the helpful ones, the ones that are here to support us and protect us. And so this is where it's really good. The more we know about those, and the more that we are able to heal our wounds, our deep-rooted wounds that create all sorts of the trauma patterns, and really at the effect of victimization and at the effect of life, the more we heal those, the less likely we are ever to have that happen to us. Now, it doesn't mean that that's also true. I've had this incredibly beautiful woman, very conscious, who last year had a pretty potent demon jump into her. But these are because she is actually being called. She doesn't want to do it right now, and that's understandable. She's young. She's, she wants to have this other part of her life first. But she's talented, she's gifted, she's connected, she has psychic abilities. Ghosts love her, and she's trying to turn off her light. She's trying to say, you know what, everybody, leave me alone. I just want to be able to live my life. And so some people have that. Some people come into this world to be in the field to do these types of services. And so as well, along with that scenario of that lovely woman, conscious, beautiful woman, when a person has a demonic possession, I guess of course that's the word, it's one of the most spiritually awakening moments for a person. So a person who is uncertain or unsure or totally disconnected to the higher benevolent good, universe, all that is good, God, whatever your, spirit, whatever your connection is, this is one of the most powerful ways for a person to be like, holy shit, yes, this is real. Right? So it's a very powerful spiritual awakening for many people. And so I want to just bring that in as well. And so people who are, at the effect, people who have different kinds of things that are going to show up. And yeah, we're going to talk about some of the other things that are not demons, but are dark energies and, forces that are bothersome, troublemaking, chaotic, harmful. They like to create a lot of mischief, right? So there's a lot of that out there. So looking at the one-on-one, those are the lesser demons, and that's kind of how they work. And that, again, if we look at understanding them, they don't have a body of their own, so they're looking for power and they're looking to take it from others. But it's also one of the most amazing, I won't say amazing, it can be amazing, spiritual awakenings ever. Nobody really wants that, but those who get it can't not recognize it for what it is. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there because we have a couple more things and we only have so much time. So now I'm going to move up to the mid-size, because the mid-size are the ones that are going to be infiltrating large groups. And these large groups are going to be like church congregations. Some that are all about power, control, manipulation. Again, if the true sense of growing our consciousness and raising and evolving spiritually is about free will, choice, freedom, then all of those congregations that are trying to take away your freedom, free will, and choice, all of the ones that are saying you're wrong, you're bad, that are judging, those are another thing. Because if we're really wanting to connect into the Christ Jesus, but I'm calling it Christ Jesus because the Jesus Christ is often so wrongly misunderstood. I said that wrongly misunderstood. So misunderstood, because it's really about us making that choice, us arriving there and having that unconditional love, compassion, and forgiveness, which brings us to the higher spiritual ascension. We're ascending. Every time we evolve, we're getting better and better and better. And then I'll talk about exactly where we're all going. That's not this. I'm not going to talk about right now, but that's going to be another show because we're moving in that direction. So yes, so these, again, entities come in, these demons, and it's not just churches, it's also mid-sized corporations. It's also the mafia, the cartels, the gangs. So anything that's involved with, the trafficking of women and children, sex trafficking, of course, guns and drug trafficking, because anything that is taking away our choice and freedom is part of that. And those will affect groups, and those mid-sized demons will affect all those people that are part of that group. And, even like, drinking the Kool-Aid, right? These different cults. That cult is actually being driven by a mid-sized demon. So we want to look at, what is the consciousness around that? And so for us to work with mid-sized demons, we need to have, whenever we're working with these types of dense energies, we have to match the entities, the energy's power, and then level it up. So for that kind of demonic force, we have to have the same type of higher benevolent force, and then some. You want your force to be bigger than the other force. It's just like any kind of war or a team event or an army. This is, you want your army to be bigger and more badass than their army, right? So you have to bring in the forces. That's why we can't do this stuff alone. And then so we'll look at that, and then also hate groups, extremists, anything that lives within those where large groups of people come together in hate and extremism, right? So anything, and there's many of that around the world. So it's not just living on North American land, it's all over the place. So it's those different groups that also are being governed by that kind of a demonic mid-size entity. And it infects them and how they think and how they act. And we have this going on all over the world. We have this going on right now. We have this going on along with the elections. And this is why I bring it forward, bringing this conversation forward right now, because it is in our faces. And if we can recognize that there's a spiritual event happening within those groups, we can start to expand our consciousness to say, hey, there's something bigger going on than just everybody's fucked up. Excuse my language for all those people out there. But, but that's the thing. We have to recognize, okay, well, if we can band together spiritually and come and really look at what's the energetic behind those actions, then we can also meet it on the other side and overcome it. So how do we overcome extremists and hate groups and all that kind of stuff? Is we have to band together and have these large groups of love, of compassion, of forgiveness. And there's a lot more to that. So it's not just that, but of working together in unity. Okay, so now I'm bringing it up to the next level. So now we have the greater demons. And these are the big guys. And these are the ones that infect. They're the ones that infect all of our institutions. So if we think about institutions, they're the religious institutions that are all about, you're wrong or bad for making the choices that you made. I mean, we look at this throughout history. We look at the Inquisitions. We look at the religious wars against each other. That is not what the divine Trinity had in store for humanity. So we look at how it infected that and how the belief system is coming out of that. Now, I want to even back up a moment, because even within the stuff that I'm finding on the news, I'm shocked. I'm not shocked. I just want to bring it out, because one of the things that is happening, and I say that everybody gets to choose, but I just want to make sure that we're understanding what we're looking at, because even within, some people might have heard about the Heritage Foundation, which is hugely behind this whole Project 2025 within the United States election and what's being kind of created behind Trump's administration. That is being created with a mid-sized demon. That's a mid-sized demon, but it lives within the umbrella of the greater demon of institutionality. So I just want to make sure that we can recognize how they're connected. And then also government institutions are prime targets. So when we talk about that, we're looking at like how our economies are. Capitalism that wants to completely, get rid of all. They don't care about the environment or the people because they want the money. And I'm running out of time here. So there's the economies, capitalism and communism. There's also the financial, the International Monetary Fund, and even the World Health Organization. Now, these are organizations that are all institutions. And so there is some good, but there's also some insidious stuff that goes on behind that. Now, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I will carry some of this forward into next week's show. If you have any questions, any thoughts, anything that you would like for me to address, you're welcome to reach out to me. As you know, you can always send me an email on my website at www.andrea, or just contact me there at andreadragonfly.com. Contact me. You can certainly send me an email. You certainly can also reach out to me at Facebook and Instagram at connected.dragonfly. As always, it's a pleasure to bring this information to y'all, and connect to your angels, connect to the team that you may or may not know. This is a very interesting time with everything that's like going on around us, and just stay connected to that which you know is good and yummy and of the higher light. So enjoy your week, and I'll see you next week. And thanks for being here. Take care.
This has been Connected with your host, Andrea Dragonfly. Join Andrea each week on an extraordinary journey, exploring the consciousness of energy and how you are connected. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.